Alrighty, off we go here with the mid-year 2026 market update and forecast. See a lot of familiar faces here live, but if you're new to our ecosystem, I'm Bill Middleton. I'm the founder and head coach here at Middleton Elite Coaching. We do these about once a quarter or so. Today, I also have a new segment for you that I'm referring to as the 5 types of agents. So we're going to go through where we've been since our last market update back in April. And then we're going to talk about what I see coming. That is largely an unchanged thesis if you've been with us before. Then I'm going to talk about the 5 types of agents that I'm seeing in the market right now. And then we'll discuss what we're going to do, or what I would propose you would do between now and the end of the year, to both finish the year strong, but also set yourself up for 2027, as there are a lot of things beyond our control and things within our control on the horizon. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to first walk you through where we are right now, the calls that we made back in April. And most of those you have all dealt with and have seen in your markets. But here's what we said. We were in the middle of the spring market, and I said to you, I think that rates are likely going to stay higher for longer. That has proven to be true. In fact, you'll see later rates are actually up from where they are. That little rate drop that we got was just a little bit of risk off, but now risk is back on. Most of that is geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, which we'll also talk about later today. Those of you who are in coaching with us heard us at the very beginning of the year and then reiterate in the spring that the goal was to sell everything that you could sell by the end of May. To be maybe even a little bit more specific, we were saying sell as many houses as you could possibly sell through the first half of the year, because we felt like summertime and then headed into the midterm elections were going to be far more difficult. That has proven to be true. There are certainly bright spots in the market, which we'll also talk about a little bit later today. We said that the buyer's markets were going to continue to spread. Inventory was going to continue to grow relative to demand. That has held to be true. Closer we get to November, the messier it gets. That's still the thesis. And then some pre-midterm political finagling, maybe creating temporary relief, not necessarily structural relief in the broader market. I haven't really seen much of that yet, but I think as it gets closer to the midterm, we will certainly see that. So that was kind of all that we were forecasting roughly 3 months ago. I would propose to you that all of those things have held to be true. The big one really is this rates higher for longer. And those of you who've been around me for a while know we've been actually calling this since late 2024, that we felt like the market sort of misunderstood directionally where rates were headed. That has largely proven to be true. As of this week, FHA at 6.55 on average, conforming and jumbos are higher than that. They've moved up over the past couple of months for reasons that you're familiar with, but we're also going to discuss. New Fed chair in place hasn't really changed the trajectory. We won't talk about that much today unless it comes up in the Q&A segment. And I think largely the market's not pricing this in. The direction is that rates will continue to stay higher for longer. And just since we were last together in this format, at least roughly 3 months ago, the probability of rate increases is actually higher than it was just a few months ago as well. So don't hear that as doom and gloom. Just hear that as further reiteration that rate relief is unlikely. And if your business is waiting on rate relief to bring buyer demand back, you're probably not going to get it anytime soon. Okay, so with that being said, what's coming? This is largely like thesis unchanged, but I want to lay this out for you if you need the refresher, or if perhaps this is your first time at one of these little shindigs here with me. I still think that the midterm election is going to be the most consequential election of my lifetime. I can't speak for you. And there's 3 cases I'd lay out for you here. The base case is my call, but let's start with that one. Base case is from here we are right now, live in late July through the midterm election. I think the market largely moves sideways. You'll see little fits and starts that are news cycle related things. Within each of your markets, you have these bright spots. So maybe I'll just rabbit trail here for just a second. I'm keenly aware that in many of your markets, there are certain types of homes that are still selling really quickly. There are certain types of homes that are still selling at full list price or sometimes even with multiple offers. We've talked about this in previous sessions, written about it on our website, but we would describe that as the home that is a 10 out of 10 in location, the home that is a 10 out of 10 in condition, the home that is priced properly relative to the active comps. The smart money is still fighting over that house. We were talking yesterday with all the coaches on my team, and they all see this in their markets and with their clients as well. Not to be too buzzwordy about it, but very hyper local. You can have a house here and you can have a house 3 miles down the road, and those could actually be two very different pricing strategies. Those can be two very different markets, if you will. So when you hear me say market, know that I'm talking in broad strokes about broader market conditions, whereas you might think of market as the nuances within your actual geographical area. But sideways through the election, and my hope, and this is, I know that hope is not a strategy, but I'm forever an optimist. My hope is that at the midterm election, there is some conclusive resolution to it, one direction or another. I have an opinion, but I'm not going to insert it into this discussion. But what markets really need is some degree of certainty, one direction or the other. I think we get that. And I think it'll be bumpy and I think it'll be messy, but I think ultimately we get that. And then that sets us up for end of this year, maybe in that run between like Thanksgiving and before Christmas break, probably a little pop of what was pent up demand. And you see this every election cycle where you have people in like kind of starts Labor Day-ish, but intensifies in late September and into October, where you hear people say, I'm just going to wait and see. I'm going to wait until the election's over or whatever. And I understand that that's just people trying to find a way to be more decisive. But it is a fact that there is some demand during that period of time that gets delayed. The thing that we're not certain about, but I'd like for you to pay attention to, is where that demand gets shifted to. My sense is that some of it gets shifted to between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And again, optimistic view of the base case here is that leads us into a decent start to 2027, likely listings driven early in the year, as you typically see, and then an early start to the spring market of 2027, which was actually what we were initially hoping would happen in the spring market of 2026 before we decided to go start another war. And the market was actually setting up that way. And when we were together in April on this webinar, we were sort of talking about the after effects of that, which you continued to see linger. So base case is messy up to the midterms, some resolution at the midterms, a little pop at the end of the year, an early listings pop in January, and back into a spring market. Still with no meaningful rate relief by then, but largely domestic politic. I'm going to put air quotes around resolution that brings a little more certainty to the market. That's my working theory for right now. You're certainly entitled to your own. Let me give you the margins on both of those. Bull case, low probability, in my opinion, on this. Early relief would mean lasting resolution in the Middle East and/or Russia, Ukraine, and hot off the presses over the past few days and over the next week, some meaningful resolution to trade policy and tariffs, which seems increasingly unlikely. But you'd kind of have to have each of those resolved sooner rather than later for me to move even more optimistic than the base case. Rhetorically, I just ask you to consider what the likelihood of those things are. My opinion is that that's low probability. And then the bear case, which I don't want to sound like I just keep showing up at these things with a wet blanket to throw on the party, but part of my job is to try to see around corners for our collective benefit. I see the bear case as more likely than the bull case. That is messy leading into the midterms, various shenanigans, perhaps by both parties around the midterms, lack of meaningful resolution that kind of drags on a little bit, spooks global investors even more than they already are. And then that risk premium actually goes up, which pushes rates higher, maybe even higher than we'd like for them to be, and drives additional uncertainty through the end of the year. That hopefully we would have some relief into early 2027 on that. Again, that's not my call, but I think that's something that we should be mindful of as both the rhetoric and the shenanigans likely intensify as we approach the midterms. So it's not lost on me that every election cycle, people want to talk about elections, and sometimes it has an impact and sometimes it doesn't. I think this one sets up to be more of an impact than in prior years. Happy to talk about that more during Q&A if that's helpful. We already talked about all the overhangs that are in this. These are just like things I'd be watching for: conflicts, macro monetary policy, risk, yada, yada, yada. The other thing I'm just pinning here, mostly so we have it as a receipt for later if it's needed. I do not think it's going to have an impact on business in 2026. It may have minor impact in 2027, but I think it's coming faster than most people think. And that's AI-driven displacement and AI-driven unemployment. I think people are dramatically underestimating the potential impact of that. Not coming tomorrow. Perhaps there's going to be some ongoing discussion politically, maybe some legislation that slows things down. But if things continue at the speed that they're going, which I'm very excited about as a business builder, but simultaneously monitoring about impact on employment, because as we all know, unemployed people don't buy houses. So nothing to worry about in the back half of the year. Be mindful of it in the future, pinning it here for later. One little note, and I'll just point you to some resources that we're going to post to our website later this week. You might have noticed that Congress recently passed what they call the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. Interestingly, it passed with bipartisan support without the signature of the president. You can do your own homework on that. I won't give you any commentary on it. But per NAR, this is, quote, the most significant housing legislation in 30 plus years. My opinion is that it's directionally good for the industry long term, probably not going to make a difference in your 2026 or 2027 business, unless you happen to have a certain investor niche or multifamily niche or commercial real estate repurposing and urban center opportunity zones niche. Rather than spending a whole bunch of time telling you what's in it, we're almost done putting the finishing touches on sort of a guide to what's in it and what you should pay attention to. You'll be able to find that by the end of this week at middletonelitecoaching.com and the resources tab there. But it's meaningful in the grand scheme of things. So check it out. Okay. This will probably eat up a decent chunk of our time. This 5 types of agents conversation that ties into both market forecasting and what I would coach you and your teams to be thinking about headed into the back half of the year and into 2027. And I've talked about this with a few of you on the call. We discussed it with my coaches yesterday, but hang with me for a second while I walk you through this, please. My observation has been, and there's no judgment in any of this. This is purely an observation from a guy who's going on his 19th year in the business right now. I think there are 5 types. Let's talk about each, and then let's talk about how this sets up for the back half of the year. Agent type number 1 is the agent who has their head down. They're perhaps maybe even on the hamster wheel. They're really very deal focused. They're working on the things that are right in front of them. Again, nothing wrong with this. Working on the deals right in front of them. And either because they don't have the time to or don't have the awareness of, they're not doing anything meaningful with AI or pursuing what that could look like in the next piece of their business. This is not an AI webinar, but there is a through line here. All right. So let's call number 1, hamster wheel, head down, just getting after it, very deal focused. Agent number 2, basically on the same hamster wheel, but has begun to utilize AI for light task work, listing descriptions, cleaning up emails, maybe some personal stuff like meal prep or helping them with their workouts or whatever it is. Sort of a taskmaster, almost like if you had a VA, this might be something they would be helping with kind of thing, but still very like one-off usage. It is true that this agent is getting some help and getting some time back, but I would also say that there's nothing that's being structurally built around it. It's almost like a little bit of AI whack-a-mole that's happening there. Okay, so now we go to agent number 3. And agent number 3, perhaps some of you have found yourselves in this spot if you attended our AI webinar 6 or 8 weeks ago that I did that, or maybe you've been to one of our other discussions on this. They see that AI could be a massive structural advantage, building it as an operational system, not as a task helper. But they see that and then kind of get overwhelmed with how big it is or how big it could be or the unknowns of it. And I wouldn't fault you if you find yourself in that spot. And then the default is they fall back down to level number 2, which is I'm just going to do my deals and use it as a taskmaster because the idea of building operational scale with AI feels too big, uncertain, difficult, nebulous, whatever it is. So agent type 3 kind of falls back into agent type 2. The fourth, and this is really where strategically we're trying to encourage, coax, persuade, pull, drag, whatever phrase you want to use, everyone into is group number 4. And these are the agents who are aware of the structural advantages, the operational advantages of building something with AI, and they're actually doing it. Even if they're moving slowly through it right now, because it's sort of the Wild West for a lot of people, they're building repeatable processes, repeatable workflows, actual infrastructure versus just one-off task acceleration. This is the group that has the opportunity to make the biggest headway over the next 12 to 18 months. Let's pause here before we talk about the exit or the off-ramp in just a second. I've said a handful of times recently in coaching calls and in a group mastermind with our coaches, there used to be a time when an agent would come to me or any of our coaches or colleagues who have a lot of experience doing this, and it would sort of ask the question like, okay, here I am as a solo agent or relatively new to the business, but I've got some good things going. I'm doing some deals. I'm building some momentum, and I think there's more to it. And the question would sound something like, if I wanted to build this to a level of doing $1 million of GCI, $1 million worth of revenue a year or more, how long would it take me from this point to get to there? Oversimplifying it here for a second, but my classic answer was something like, well, if you had a really good coach, wink, wink, it would probably take you 4 to 5 years of really focused attention to go from kind of sort of building something with momentum up to $1 million of GCI. What I believe to be true is that you're going to see people do that in 12 to 18 months on the back of AI. Let me say that again. I think you're going to see people go from, and I'm not talking about from like brand new agent, never sold a house. I'm talking about they already got through that learning curve. Maybe they're 12 to 24 months into the business. Maybe they're 3 years into the business. They've done deals and they're building some momentum. From that spot to $1 million of GCI, I think you're going to see people do that in 12 to 18 months. I don't think it's going to be the norm, but the speed with which everything is getting compressed, the speed with which things can be done, the time that we're seeing people and personally experiencing able to free up to then go spend on building more connections in their communities, working their database, building marketing plans, automating workflows in the back end, whatever it is. I mentioned to the coaches yesterday, I think when this happens, it's going to feel like a lightning strike. And I'm not here to preach to you about it, although I probably did just a little bit, so I'll hop off the soapbox. But I see these 4 groups of agents out there right now. And I'm very clear, and I'll turn this into like, what do we do about all this in just a second? But I'm very clear that the agents, teams, brokerage firms, businesses of any kind that find themselves in group 4 are going to be the clear winners, massive land grabs. And the agents who are in groups 1, 2, and 3 either need to, in my opinion, so take it or leave it, in my opinion, need to find their way to tier 4, or they need to start looking at an off ramp. Hear me out on this. One of the biggest trends in small business, and we've talked about this in prior sessions and in prior in-person meetings, one of the biggest trends you're going to see in small business over the next 5 to 10 years is mostly aging boomers who have built great businesses, who usually don't have an exit strategy and need to figure out a way to capture some of that value as they move into the sunset of their careers or off to retirement or whatever that looks like. I was, as a little bit of an anecdotal evidence on this, a few months ago, I was on a call with some of our business partners in another venture I'm involved in. And one of the guys in the group is in his late 70s. And there was a general question about AI and its role in business. And I went on a little kind of soapbox rant. And this older gentleman, whose partner, said, I'm glad that I'm old enough to not have to worry about any of that. And while he meant it, I think, a little bit tongue in cheek, but also completely serious, I think there is a group of business owners in any business right now who would look at this 4 rungs of this ladder or stair step or whatever you want to call it and be like, cool, Middleton, like, I see where you're coming from, but I don't want any part of that. And that's okay. What I would suggest, if you find yourself in that spot, is we need to talk offline about how you can ring the cash register sooner rather than later, because the people who are in group number 4 are just going to come take the business out from under you in the next 12 to 24 months if you don't exit with some kind of value. So, full summary here, my encouragement on this, and then we're going to talk very practically about what to do between now and the end of the year and how that sets up for 27. I'd be really careful if you're in group number 1, because you're inadvertently creating structural risk in your business long term. If you're in number 2, great. So that's your like light task management via AI. I have some homework for you on that in just a second. You find yourself in group number 3, falling back to group number 2. I'm going to encourage you just to keep pushing through that. And if you're in group number 4, I'm going to encourage you to like double and triple down on the speed and efficacy with which you're building, because you're going to build a massive, massive, massive advantage. If none of these resonates with you, then let's talk about what pushing the exit button looks like for you. You're like, okay, cool. So then what does all of that mean? I think there are a few pieces that determine how we would coach you to allocate your time in the back half of the year. And they're here on the slide, and I'll make sure all of you get the slide deck. We'll post it online as well. But I'm thinking of this in thirds. And a number of you on the call, a lot of our clients did a fantastic job in the first half of this year. We have people that we coach, I won't name names, but you know who you are, who did more business in the first half of this year than you did all of last year. You're in the group that's built a really big lead. You've built a cash cushion. You're ahead of pace relative to your goal. If you are in that group and this prior conversation that we had about these stages resonates with you and you want to move up the ladder, then my encouragement would be to spend 1/3 of your time on now business. I'm not saying like don't go do deals. You still need to do that. We still need to take listings, help buyers, put points on the board, et cetera. But if you've got a lead and you want to grow, then I think it's 1/3 of your time is spent on now business and 2/3 of your time is spent on building. And we could talk more about what building looks like, but let's just hear this as like the reinvention of the operations and the marketing and the scale of your business, largely AI enabled. So you're going to do 1/3 now business, 2/3 build. If you're behind, so behind relative to goal, your cash cushion is thin, you legit need to you hear me on all of this, but you legit need to go sell more houses, then I'd like for you to focus 2/3 of your time on the now business and 1/3 of your time on building. This is not in my opinion, 90% of your time on the now business and 10% on building, because you're going to get left in the dust. I would encourage you to have your minimum allocation of time related to building, which we won't fully explore today, but the concept should still land. Minimum 1/3 of your time on building, upwards of perhaps 2/3 of your time on building. You're right. All right. So what do we got to do to go find some deals? There's a lot of thought process about strategic thinking and where we want to go and buckets we're in and whatever. But the reality is a lot of us still need to go find some deals right now. And this is not an exhaustive list. Some of this is refreshers. I'll add a few things on top of it. But if we're talking about the market's not doing us any favors right now, seasonality's not doing us any favors right now, domestic politics, geopolitics, monetary policy, like the whole list, there's very little in there outside of our control to create a spark. So we've got to go find a way to internally create sparks. I believe that right now is the best time to be a buyer in at least the last 4 years. And sure, there are little pockets where that may not be true, but overwhelmingly, and like I talked about in the April update, the vast majority of the major metro markets in the U.S. are technically in buyers markets right now. You have seen this in your own markets where buyers are able to take advantage of rising inventory, days on market, much stronger negotiating leverage, seller concessions, builder incentives. The list goes on and on and on and on. So best time to be a buyer in 4+ years. That's counterintuitive to the narrative that's out there in the market. But I think every buyer in your pipeline needs to hear that message and your explanation as to why. Creates a big advantage for your cash buyers, as you've seen. So I would focus specifically on cash buyers who are willing to hear this message and tie this with point number 2, which is motivated sellers. And we've talked about this a lot, but I see this accelerating as well, is cherry picking. And we find the somewhat motivated cash buyer or somewhat motivated, less market sensitive buyer. And we find the seller who is super motivated for whatever reason. And you put those two parties together and you see a lot of deals that look like 10% plus discount to list price, 10% plus discount to actual comp value of that house. This is not new information to you as much as it is an encouragement that I think the way you're going to put the back half of the year together from a deals standpoint is either you're leveraging some lead generation or marketing system that you've already built, awesome, or you're going to have to go out and use your brain power and your grit to put deals together. A few things we talked about the last time we were together that I'll just bring back to the surface because these are always good ideas. Top 100 people in your database. I still see most people are passively marketing to their database, not actively engaging with it in a one-on-one. So the best practice there would be for everybody in your top 100, for every team member that you have, everyone in their top 100, or if they're relatively new, their top 50. Who are they? What's their next real estate move? What's the motivating factor of the next real estate move? What, if anything, is holding them back for it? And what could we do to catalyze a transaction there? I think that's a great ongoing discussion in your team meetings, in that focus of putting deals on the board between now and the end of the year. And perhaps connected to this, sort of the old industry jargon cliche, the 5 Ds that you're looking for: motivating factors, diamonds, diapers, diplomas, divorce, and downsizing. All of those are still there. Biggest trend by far continues to be older sellers, estate sale situations, family inheritances, things that rhyme with that. So those of you who've done a really good job of building those connections are reaping those benefits. If you've heard this message over and over and haven't quite got around to building some structural advantage, particularly with boomer sellers, just hear this as your friendly reminder that the market's bringing you that opportunity right now. Let's talk about AI infrastructure homework, because undoubtedly, as you were listening to me soapbox about some of those things earlier, it's like, okay, well, what do I do next? And before I get into what's on the list, I'll give you a few other observations. Um, I think what I've seen is that there's a lot of AI related or AI for real estate related training out there that is focused on um, custom stacks, custom agents, automated workflows, all the really sexy stuff. And it's super cool. And that's great. And those people are doing awesome. And I don't fault those people for training that. But I think it's so far ahead of where most people are that it feels cool and impossible all at the same time. So the way that we've begun to lay this out, at least from a training standpoint, we're talking about this differently with our clients based on where they are on the roadmap. But I'm sort of looking at this as like crawl, walk, run, and sprint really fast. And I think most people are still in kind of that crawl phase. They're in the maybe I'm using it, maybe I'm not. If I am, it's kind of like a taskmaster, but I'm not sure where to go next. So rather than spending a bunch of airtime on it, what I would recommend that you do, if you haven't done it, is go back and watch the webinar I did back in May. So we called that AI Infrastructure for Real Estate Teams Part 1. Part 2 will come soon. It's about a 45-minute to 1 hour webinar. You can find that at middletonelitecoaching.com and the resources. And then the second part of that, which is referenced often in the webinar, is do the actual setup homework from that session, which is also available on our website in the resources section. This is how to teach it to better understand you, to give you higher quality answers versus giving you AI slop back when you try to do something. Some of you have already done that, and that's cool, which we'll get to number 3 in just a second. But if you haven't done those two things yet, and what I've said to you feels like I don't even know where to start, please just go start there and then come back to point number 3 here. So point number 3 would be you've done the setup, you've done what we call strategic foundation interview. You've created a plan inside AI so that it better understands you and your business. And now you're ready to start building something more systematically in there. And this is where a lot of training wants to like jump to custom agents and co-work and all these other things, which are great, but too far ahead in my opinion. I think the really simple way to start is you and your team create a list of all of the pain points in your business. And don't overthink this. It's like the thing that you're currently doing. I wouldn't even start with like things that are aspirational that you haven't gotten to yet, because we've got to create some time and bandwidth to be able to do those. So hang with me here for just a second. I want to tie a couple of notes together. If the thought is if I'm ahead, I'm going to spend 1/3 of my time doing deals, 2/3 of my time building, then this is how you start building. Even if you only have 1/3 of your time to start building because you're like behind or have some razor margins or need more cash or whatever, this is how I would coach you to spend your 1/3 of your time building some AI infrastructure in your business. Let's go back to the pain points. You start with a list of all of the things that currently are being done in your business that create pain or bottlenecks for you. If you wanted to keep a separate list of things that are aspirational, they're like, these are not things that we're doing right now, but if we had more bandwidth, we think AI could help with this. That's totally cool. But please don't go there. It's a trap to resist, because, and I see people do this, is they're like, oh, I've got all this stuff that I kind of do over here, and it's duct tape and bubble gum and Band-Aids and whatever, but it kind of works. And I got this really cool shiny idea over here that I know AI could help me with. And then they go do that first. And the mistake I see with that is it's sort of like putting new stuff in a boat that leaks a little bit. You probably don't want to do that, and instead fix all the leaks first and then put new stuff in. So let me give you an example. I was talking with a client about this the other day. She might even be here live on the session, but I won't mention any names because this will be broadly applicable to all of you. And we talked about pain points, and she's already done the homework for points 1 and 2 and had a lot of interaction. And I said, well, what's something that's happening in your business right now that creates a lot of pain, burns a lot of time, burns a lot of mental energy? And her response was inspection repair request addendums. And I've talked with a number of clients about this since then, and everybody sort of like nods and smiles on that one. And so the current process of doing inspection repair request addendums for most agents is we read the report or we read the summary of the report. We use our brain power and our years of experience. We sit down at our computer at 8 o'clock at night so nobody can actually bother us. And for 2 hours, this was her number, roughly 2 hours, we sit there and go through all of it and write this really detailed, well thought out, referenced 2 pages and photos, inspection repair request addendum. And then we write this really good professional email to the listing agent and we submit all of that. And in round numbers, let's just call it for purposes of this discussion, roughly 2 hours to do that whole thing. And then you'd extrapolate that out and you'd say, okay, well, how many times based on the number of buyers that I represent and deals that I do, et cetera, how many times am I going to have to do that this year? And let's say for discussion purposes that number is 25 times. And, you don't have to be a mathematician to look at that and say, okay, well, 25 times 2 is 50 hours a year that I'm spending writing repair request addendums. Not to mention that it's 50 hours a year, probably that I'm doing in off hours because I can't do it in 15 or 20 minutes here or there, distracted by the day. Not to mention that for most agents, there's like brain damage that comes from having to do that creates this huge energy drain that downstream of having written that, most, myself included, would be too tired to want to do anything else. So you're also kind of robbing from the next activity. But if we just said in this example, here's a pain point, it costs me 2 hours times 25 times a year is 50 hours a year. And all of the other intangibles are at least noted. And if we solved that, we would get all of that time back every year. If you run a team, if you solved that, you would also then solve it for every one of your team members because now they're doing it in the way that you would want it done. So here's the punchline. To go from 2 hours down to 10 or 15 minutes is very doable. Lots of ways you could do it, but here's what I would recommend. You pick the pain point, and then rather than trying to do it one at a time moving forward, and we talked about this in the AI webinar a couple of months ago, you go backfill with what I would call your greatest hits. So in this case, we said, take your 10 best. 10 is an arbitrary number, but I think it's a good enough data set. Take your 10 best inspection repair request addendums that you've ever written, the emails that you wrote to the listing agent that went with the addendum, and the report or reports, if you have multiple, on that subject property, and that represents package number 1. And you go load 10 of those greatest hits packages into preferably Claude, but you could use whatever platform you want to after you watch webinar number 1. Don't go do this first. This is number 3, not number 1. Go do number 1, then number 2, then do this. So you go load all of those in, and then you ask AI to create what I'm going to use my words here, create an inspection repair request addendum writing protocol. It's going to give you version number 1. It's going to read all of those things, and it's going to say, hey, here's what I think a custom repeatable prompt would be for this workflow. And we're going to call that version 1. And you're like, cool. So later this week, you get a inspection back from a buyer that you're representing. You could even like just pull a different one from the past if you want to test this, but you maybe pull a new one. And rather than sitting down and reading it first, rather than sitting down and starting to write something, you just drop it in and you ask your AI to run the custom repeatable prompt that you built from your 10 greatest hits. And then to spit out for you the things that it thinks you should review, the things that should be in the repair request addendum, et cetera, et cetera. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is it going to significantly trim the amount of time you have to spend reviewing it? Yes. So let's say that you did this and you cut your total time in version 1 from 2 hours down to 45 minutes. But it still wasn't great, and you iterated. And then you iterate again, and then you iterate again. I've done this in a zillion different areas. That's exaggerating. I've done this in a lot of areas in my business over the past 6 months. What I have found is that usually by version 3, certainly no later than by version 5. That thing is so dialed in that it does it maybe even better than you could do it yourself. And you get to a spot where now you took a pain point, fed into a properly set up AI for yourself, created a custom repeatable prompt that you iterated a few times. And now you look up and something that used to take you 2 hours and a lot of brain damage every time you did it now takes 5 to 10 minutes. The quality is better, the speed is faster, and then you move on. And you're like, cool, that sounds awesome. So now you take that and you multiply it across every pain point in your business. And that's where you start. And we're only talking about back office stuff right now that you're currently doing. That's where you start to see this flywheel kick in and all of this extra time comes back to you. Okay, take a deep breath with me. So part 5 then, as this is the who question, because I know, because I live in some of your brains, some of you are like, this is great, but that's way too much for me. All right, then if it's not you, then it's got to be somebody else in your world. I think it's a team member. It's not outsourcing to a third party. Maybe it's an existing team member has this skill and we just need to go leverage it. Maybe an existing team member or yourself have the ability to go learn this skill, but you're not sure where to start. So that's where you leapfrog ahead into taking a really high quality training course on something like this. Or if you're not engaged with a really high quality coach, wink, wink, this is an area that we could help you with as well. So I'd like for you, if any of this resonated with you about the 1/3, 2/3, about the stair steps up into the big advantages of building this scale, I hope this doesn't land as like, oh, I thought we were talking about market updates. We're talking about what happened in the market, what's coming in the future, and more importantly than what's going to ebb and flow with geopolitics and monetary policy. We're talking about perhaps the biggest technological revolution in human history. Certainly the biggest thing we've seen in this industry since the internet, and it's going to happen faster. That's how big of a deal this is. Okay. That gets us to what will either be a completely quiet Q&A or a very spirited one. I'm not sure which. Either of which would be fine. What I'll have you do is I'm going to hang here because we're right on time. We've got 10 minutes or so if we want it. If you have any questions that you'd like for me to make sure that I address, if you'll please just throw them in the chat box, and then I'll skim that and grab any questions that might come up. As you're thinking about your questions, a couple of little announcements I'll make, and then I'll come back to the chat box. You'll all get a copy of the recording. This will also be published to our YouTube channel, published to the resources at middletonelitecoaching.com. Slide deck will go there, and then the other things that have been referenced throughout are all findable for you there as well. So it's our goal to create a lot of resources for you as well, not just the presentation itself. I'll give it another minute or two and see if there are any questions that pop into the chat box. If so, then we'll go from there. All right, questions starting to roll in here. All right, AI success story. Integration of AI into your calendar to help create task lists. Assuming we've done the first webinar, do you plan to do a follow-up webinar? So Zane, to your question on follow-up webinar, yes, probably September-ish on that, once we get out of the summer and everybody's back and fully locked in business mode. Zach, on calendar integration, a couple of different ways that you could do that depending on the platform. Gemini does that nicely because it's a Google product if you're running a Google Calendar. But Claude has the ability to sync with a number of those things as well. I can chat with you offline about that. But that is a cool little thing that you can run. A number of our clients have done this too, where you can plug it into your calendar and then ask it, like if you've done the the strategic foundation interview and tied things like your business plans and the way that you're thinking about the business exist within your AI. And then you plug in the calendar to it so it has the ability to read and see what's there, or it can even edit it, but I'd be hesitant on that. And then you just ask it to compare the two and sort of say, like, here's what I'm telling you that I want to accomplish. Here's what my calendar actually says that I'm working on. Tell me how aligned those two things are, or identify opportunities where I might have room for improvement. It's not unlike in coaching where we would say to someone, we have a good understanding of your goals. Send me a screenshot of your calendar and let's compare that to what the ideal calendar can be. That would be a really good use case for it. Lane's question about AI success stories and biggest difference almost immediately. Man, there are a lot of different ones here. What I would say is, for most people, the wins are small and incremental right now. Here's the way I sort of think about it is, as you're growing and you're building some scale, there is a segment within AI that makes all of your admin tasks and workflows easier. So the listing inspection repair addendum was an example of that. But you could come up with an endless number of ways administratively. So think of that as like back of house work. Then there are a number of different ways that you could incorporate it more from a front of house, like AI marketing assistant. And we've had people build websites with it and landing pages and optimize paid campaigns and write newsletters and everything else. So think of it as like, maybe I'm oversimplifying right now, but there's three places I'd go. I'd go admin workflow efficiencies. I'd go forward-facing marketing, collateral creation and monitoring. And then I would go strategic thinking partner. And to draw a quick delineation here, I see a lot of folks go straight to asking big strategic questions to an AI platform that has no meaningful context about them. And so they get really crappy answers back. So a lot of that, like stuff we talked about in the webinar and the corresponding homework and the way that we're digging in there, is so that we get better, well-informed strategic answers. So maybe in those three buckets would be the way that I would be thinking about it. And then pain point analysis on each. Where are my admin, back office, paperwork, workflow pain points? Where are all of my consumer facing, forward looking marketing pain points? And where do I have strategic gaps or opportunities or gaps in my strategic thinking? And those become maybe three buckets to play with. So hopefully that's helpful. And I'll pull that question forward into the next AI webinar as well, because I know that's a really popular one. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so Gina's talking about that was her with the repair addendum. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I could use your name or not. So thanks for that, Gina. Any other questions, comments, or feedback before we wrap up today? All right, excellent. Thanks everybody for your time today and your attention. I really appreciate it. If we can do anything else to help you, you can find me at middletonelitecoaching.com or ping me via email at bill@middletonelitecoaching.com. We'll see you next time.